I am Cordelia Blackwood, 34 years old, sitting at my family's mahogany dining table, enduring yet another evening of barely concealed disappointment. My sister discusses her latest courtroom victory while my mother sighs, squeezing my hand with that all-too-familiar look of concern. Dad focuses intently on his salmon, avoiding eye contact whenever my career comes up. 8 years of this ritual. 8 years of being the family's cautionary tale, despite everything I'd achieved that they couldn't see or understand. The television murmurs in the background, CNN providing white noise to mask the uncomfortable silences between discussions of my wasted potential. Only I notice when my face suddenly appears on the screen. Before I tell you how my family's expressions changed from pity to shock in a matter of seconds, let me take you back to where this all began. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me to see how I went from family disappointment to becoming the youngest FBI director in American history. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a family where success had very specific parameters. My father, Harrison Blackwood, was a federal judge on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. My mother, Vivian, was a partner at one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms, specializing in corporate mergers. My older sister Beatrice was already clerking for a Supreme Court justice by the time I graduated from Yale. Success in our family meant Ivy League credentials, partnership tracks, and judicial appointments. It meant six-figure starting salaries and the kind of respectability that opened doors at country clubs and charity galas. From my earliest memories, I was drawn to something entirely different. While Beatrice played with toy gavels and courthouse sets, I was fascinated by puzzles, codes, and mysteries. I devoured Nancy Drew books, then graduated to Agatha Christie, then moved on to true crime documentaries that my parents found disturbing for a 10-year-old. My interest in law enforcement began with my Uncle Marcus, my father's younger brother, who had become a detective with the NYPD. Uncle Marcus was the family's black sheep, the one who had thrown away his Harvard law degree to chase criminals through Queens. During family gatherings, he was treated with polite tolerance, his stories of police work received with strained smiles and quick subject changes. But I hung on every word. When I was 12, he showed me how fingerprints were analyzed, how crime scenes were processed, how seemingly unrelated clues could unravel complex cases. "The truth is always there, Cordelia," he told me during one of our secret conversations in my father's study. "You just have to know how to look for it." Throughout middle school and high school, I excelled academically, just as Beatrice had. Perfect grades, debate team captain, editor of the school newspaper. My parents beamed with pride as college recruiters called, assuming I would follow the family path into law. Harvard sent recruitment materials highlighting their pre-law programs. Yale emphasized their political science department. Columbia showcased their connections to federal clerkships. My father would spread these brochures across his desk, discussing the strategic advantages of each choice. "Harvard has the strongest alumni network for federal positions," he would say, sliding their materials to the top. Though Yale's connections to the Supreme Court are unparalleled, what they didn't know was that I had been secretly researching criminal justice programs, corresponding with professors who specialized in forensic psychology, and reading everything I could about federal law enforcement careers. The night I revealed my true intentions remains etched in my memory. It was March of my senior year, just weeks before college acceptance letters would arrive. We were having dinner, discussing Beatrice's latest oral argument before the Ninth Circuit. "I've decided on my major," I announced during a lull in conversation. My father smiled expectantly. "Excellent choice, Cordelia. Political science with a pre-law track." "Criminal justice," I said firmly. "I want to work for the FBI." The silence that followed was profound. My mother set down her wine glass with a soft clink that seemed to echo through the dining room. Beatrice's expression shifted from confusion to what looked almost like embarrassment on my behalf. "That's unexpected," my mother finally managed. "When did this interest develop?" "It's always been my dream," I replied. My father cleared his throat, his judicial composure slipping slightly. "Cordelia, law enforcement is admirable public service, but you have to think about your future. Your real future. The Blackwood family has maintained certain standards for generations." Initially, there was resistance, arguments, and tears. But when acceptance letters arrived from both Georgetown's criminal justice program and John Jay College of Criminal Justice, there was also grudging acknowledgement of my academic achievements. My father, despite his reservations, couldn't help mentioning to his colleagues that his daughter had been accepted to prestigious programs. My mother, ever practical, began researching federal law enforcement careers that could eventually transition to more suitable positions. You could work your way up to federal prosecutor, she suggested hopefully. Or perhaps eventually run for attorney general. That would be quite prestigious. Neither understood that I wasn't choosing law enforcement as a stepping stone to something else. For me, investigative work was the destination, not a detour on the way to what they considered a proper career. The summer before I left for Georgetown, Uncle Marcus pulled me aside during a family barbecue. He pressed something small and metallic into my palm, his detective shield from his first case that broke a major art theft ring. "You'll earn your own badge someday," he said quietly. "But take this with you until then. Remember, the best investigators don't just solve crimes. They prevent them by understanding patterns others miss." I left for college with Uncle Marcus's shield tucked into my luggage, the only person in my family who truly understood the path I had chosen. Georgetown was everything I had hoped for and more challenging than I had anticipated. The criminal justice program was rigorous, combining theoretical criminology with practical forensic science, constitutional law, and behavioral analysis. While other students complained about the intensive coursework, I thrived on the complexity. My professors noticed my aptitude for pattern recognition early on. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, who taught advanced criminal psychology, called me into her office after our midterm exam. "Cordelia, your analysis of the serial cases was exceptional," she said, reviewing my paper. "You identified behavioral patterns that took the original investigators months to recognize. Have you considered specializing in behavioral analysis?" This conversation led to my first internship with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit during my sophomore summer. I spent 10 weeks at Quantico, observing profilers work active cases, learning how psychological principles could unlock criminal behavior patterns. The work was intense and sometimes disturbing, but I found myself naturally gifted at seeing connections others missed. During one case involving a series of seemingly random burglaries, I noticed a pattern in the victim's social media presence that suggested the perpetrator was selecting targets based on posted vacation photos. This insight led to the arrest of a sophisticated identity theft ring. "You have an unusual mind, Miss Blackwood," said Agent Patricia Chun, my supervisor. "You see patterns in chaos. That's a rare gift in this field." My success at Quantico earned me recommendations for advanced internships, but it also widened the gap between my achievements and my family's understanding. During holiday breaks, their questions about my studies were met with polite but puzzled responses. "So you're studying criminals?" my mother would ask with barely concealed distaste. "I'm studying criminal behavior patterns to help solve and prevent crimes," I would correct. "Yes, dear. But when do you plan to take the LSAT?" This pattern continued throughout college. Each semester brought new achievements, Dean's List honors, research publications, competitive fellowship selections, but also deeper family disappointment that I hadn't come to my senses and switched to pre-law. My junior year brought my first major academic breakthrough. Working with Dr. Harper on her research into cybercrime patterns, I developed a predictive algorithm that could identify potential targets of online fraud schemes based on digital behavior patterns. The model was so effective that the FBI's Cybercrime Division requested permission to test it in active investigations. The algorithm's success in preventing 17 major fraud schemes caught the attention of FBI leadership. I was invited to present my research at the annual Federal Law Enforcement Conference, the youngest undergraduate ever given such an opportunity. My parents attended the presentation, sitting in the back of the auditorium as I explained how mathematical modeling could revolutionize cybercrime prevention. Their expressions throughout my talk ranged from confusion to what I hoped might be the beginning of understanding. After the presentation, Assistant Director James Morrison approached my family. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, your daughter has developed something truly remarkable. We'd like to offer her a position in our cyber division upon graduation." My father, ever the diplomat, responded carefully. "That's quite an honor. Cordelia has always been analytically minded. But I could see the questions in his eyes. This wasn't the path to partnership at a law firm or appointment to the federal bench. This was something entirely outside his framework for success. My senior year brought both my greatest academic triumph and my first real failure. My thesis on predictive behavioral modeling for terrorist recruitment patterns earned the highest honors and was classified by the Department of Homeland Security for its sensitive insights into radicalization processes. Simultaneously, I applied for the FBI's prestigious Presidential Management Fellows Program, a fast-track leadership development initiative that typically led to senior positions within federal agencies. The competition was fierce, hundreds of applicants for 12 positions. When the rejection letter arrived, I was devastated. Despite my academic achievements and research breakthroughs, I had been passed over for candidates with more traditional law enforcement backgrounds. I called home that night, seeking comfort after such a crushing disappointment. "Cordelia, perhaps this is a sign," my father said after I explained the situation. "You've proven your capabilities in this field. Now might be the time to consider law school. With your research background, you'd be extremely competitive for federal prosecutor positions." His words stung worse than the rejection letter. While he meant to console me, what I heard was confirmation of my deepest fear, that even my own family saw my chosen path as a consolation prize rather than a calling. The next day, still reeling from both the rejection and my father's response, I found myself sitting alone in the university library, staring blankly at my criminal law textbooks. A shadow fell across my table. "Mind if I join you, Miss Blackwood?" I looked up to see Agent Chen, my former supervisor from Quantico. I hadn't seen her since my internship 2 years earlier. "Of course not, Agent Chen," I responded, straightening immediately. She sat down and studied me carefully. "I heard about the PMF rejection. I also heard about your thesis classification. Interesting combination." Over the next hour, Agent Chen explained something I hadn't known. My rejection from the Presidential Management Fellows Program hadn't been based on qualifications. It had been because my research was considered too valuable to risk in a generalist leadership track. "The Bureau wants you, Cordelia," she said. "But they want you in a specialized track that matches your unique capabilities. Are you interested in starting your career in counterterrorism analysis?" This conversation led to my recruitment into the FBI's Counterterrorism Division immediately upon graduation. While other criminal justice majors were starting as field agents or analysts, I was brought in as a specialist in behavioral modeling and predictive analysis. My family attended my graduation from Georgetown, dressed in their finest clothing and wearing expressions of proud confusion. They understood that I had graduated summa cum laude and been recruited directly into federal service, but they still couldn't quite grasp what I would actually be doing. "Congratulations, Agent Blackwood," my father said formally, using my new title for the first time. "Your achievements are remarkable." "Thank you, Dad," I replied, noting that he called me agent rather than daughter. Only Uncle Marcus seemed to truly understand the significance of the moment. He pulled me aside after the ceremony, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You did it, kid," he said simply. "Now go show them what a Blackwood can really accomplish." I began my FBI career with a mixture of excitement and determination. Finally, I was where I belonged, surrounded by colleagues who understood the importance of the work we were doing. My first assignment was to the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York, where my predictive modeling expertise was immediately put to use analyzing communication patterns of suspected terrorist cells. The work was challenging and often classified, making it impossible to share details with my family. This secrecy added another layer to family gatherings. When asked about my work, I could only offer vague responses about analytical support and intelligence assessment. To my family, it sounded like I was doing glorified data entry rather than preventing potential attacks on American soil. 6 months into my assignment, my modeling identified unusual patterns in international wire transfers that suggested a terror financing network operating between New York and London. Traditional investigators had missed the connections because the transactions appeared random when viewed individually. My analysis revealed that the transfers, when mapped over time, formed a complex web that funded sleeper cells in 3 major cities. The resulting investigation, which I couldn't discuss with anyone outside the Bureau, led to the dismantling of a network that had been planning coordinated attacks on transportation infrastructure. The success brought recognition within the FBI, but to my family, I was still the daughter who had chosen an unconventional path over the prestige of private practice or judicial appointment. My second year brought a promotion to senior analyst and assignment to a classified task force focused on cyberterrorism threats. The work combined my academic research in behavioral modeling with cutting-edge cyber intelligence techniques. During this period, I developed what became known as the Blackwood Protocol, a comprehensive system for identifying potential cyber terrorists by analyzing their digital footprints, communication patterns, and online behavioral changes. The system could predict with 87% accuracy which individuals engaged in extremist online communities would escalate to planning actual attacks. The protocol's first major success came when it identified a university student in California who was in the advanced stages of planning a campus attack. The intervention prevented what could have been a massacre and led to the discovery of an entire network of radicalized individuals. FBI Director William Hayes personally commended my work, noting that the Blackwood Protocol represented a paradigm shift in how we approach domestic terrorism prevention. Yet when I attended my sister Beatrice's wedding that fall, the conversation still centered on my phase and when I might consider real career advancement. Cordelia's doing some sort of computer work for the government, I heard my mother explaining to relatives. We're hoping she'll eventually transition to something more substantial. The dismissal stung, but I had learned to focus on the impact of my work rather than my family's inability to understand it. My third year brought unexpected recognition when the Blackwood Protocol was selected for implementation across all FBI field offices. I was promoted to supervisory special agent and tasked with training analysts nationwide in the new methodology. At 27, I was the youngest SSA in the Bureau's history, but this achievement was overshadowed by a significant failure. A terrorist attack in Miami succeeded despite warnings generated by my system. The attack had been planned using methods that fell outside the behavioral patterns I had modeled, exposing critical gaps in my approach. The after-action review was brutal. Agent Blackwood, your system failed to identify a clear and present threat, the investigating committee concluded. 3 people died because we relied on incomplete analysis. That night, I called home for the first time in months, seeking comfort after such a devastating professional blow. Cordelia, perhaps this incident is a wake-up call, my father said after I explained the situation as much as security clearances allowed. You've proven your capabilities, but maybe it's time to consider a transition to federal prosecution. With your analytical background, you'd be exceptional in the courtroom. Once again, my family's response to my failure was to suggest abandoning the path I had chosen. What they didn't understand was that this failure, devastating as it was, only strengthened my resolve to improve my methods and prevent future attacks. The following day, Director Hayes called me into his office. I expected disciplinary action, possibly reassignment to a less critical role. Agent Blackwood, he began, studying me carefully. The Miami incident was a tragedy. It also revealed something important about the limitations of current analytical methods. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I'm not here to discipline you. I'm here to ask if you're willing to lead a complete overhaul of our predictive analysis capabilities. We need someone who understands both the potential and the limitations of these systems. This conversation led to my assignment as Director of Behavioral Analysis Innovation, a newly created position within the FBI's National Security Branch. At 28, I was responsible for developing next-generation analytical tools that could address the gaps exposed by the Miami attack. The work was more challenging than anything I had previously undertaken. I assembled a team of the Bureau's most innovative analysts, cybersecurity experts, and behavioral scientists. Our mission was to create a comprehensive threat assessment system that could identify potential terrorists regardless of their communication methods or attack planning approaches. For 18 months, my team worked in near-complete secrecy. We analyzed every terrorist attack of the previous decade, identifying patterns that traditional methods had missed. We developed new algorithms that could process vast amounts of data from multiple intelligence sources simultaneously. The breakthrough came when we realized that traditional analysis focused too narrowly on communications and financial transactions. Real terrorist threats could be identified by analyzing changes in routine behavior patterns, everything from travel habits to purchasing patterns to social media engagement. We called it the Integrated Behavioral Threat Assessment System, or IBTAS. Unlike previous methods that relied on specific indicators, IBTAS created comprehensive behavioral profiles that could identify threats even when terrorists used completely novel planning methods. The first test of IBTAS identified 17 potential threats across the country within its first week of operation. Follow-up investigations confirmed that 14 of these individuals were indeed in various stages of planning attacks. The system's success was so dramatic that it came to the attention of the National Security Council. I was summoned to the White House to brief the President and National Security Team on IBTA's capabilities. At 30 years old, I found myself in the Oval Office explaining how behavioral analysis could revolutionize national security. The President asked pointed questions about privacy implications and operational limitations, but was clearly impressed by the system's potential. "Agent Blackwood," he said at the conclusion of my briefing, "what you've developed here could fundamentally change how we protect the American people. How quickly can this be implemented nationwide?" Within 6 months, IBTAS was operational across all federal agencies involved in counterterrorism efforts. The system prevented 43 planned attacks in its first year of operation, including several that could have resulted in mass casualties. My work caught the attention of international intelligence agencies as well. I was invited to brief NATO allies on behavioral analysis techniques, sharing modified versions of our methods with partner nations facing similar threats. Despite these professional achievements, my family relationships remained strained. During holiday gatherings, conversations still centered on my eventual transition to something more appropriate for a Blackwood. "Cordelia's doing important work," my mother would tell her friends with forced enthusiasm. "Though we do hope she'll eventually consider judicial appointment. With her federal experience, she'd be quite competitive." The assumption that my FBI career was preparation for something else rather than an achievement in itself continued to frustrate me, but I had learned to focus on the lives saved rather than the recognition denied. My breakthrough to senior leadership came unexpectedly. Director Hayes announced his retirement, triggering a succession planning process that would reshape FBI leadership. Deputy Director Patricia Williams was widely expected to become the new director, but she surprised everyone by declining the nomination to accept a position as Director of National Intelligence. This left the position open to candidates who represented the Bureau's next generation of leadership. My name was mentioned in speculation, but I dismissed the possibility as premature. At 32, I lacked the traditional career progression that typically led to such positions. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Attorney General Sarah Chin wanted to meet with me privately to discuss future opportunities within federal law enforcement. The meeting took place in a secure conference room at the Justice Department. Attorney General Chun was direct in her approach. "Agent Blackwood, your innovations in behavioral analysis have revolutionized how we approach national security threats. IBTAS alone has prevented more attacks than any other single initiative in Bureau history." She paused, studying my reaction. "We're prepared to nominate you for FBI Director. You would be the youngest person ever appointed to this position, but your technological innovations and analytical expertise represent the future of federal law enforcement." The nomination would require Senate confirmation, a process that would inevitably draw significant media attention. "Are you prepared for the scrutiny this appointment would bring?" she asked. "Both to you personally and to your family?" I thought about my family's years of gentle disappointment, their persistent hope that I would eventually choose a more traditional path. Would this finally help them understand the significance of the work I had chosen? "I am prepared, Madam Attorney General, and honored by the consideration." The nomination was announced the following week, sending shockwaves through both the law enforcement community and political circles. Editorial pages debated whether someone so young could effectively lead the nation's premier law enforcement agency. My family's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. My father called within minutes of the announcement. Cordelia, is this real? FBI director? The entire FBI. Yes, Dad, if the Senate confirms the nomination. There was a long pause before he responded.
I don't know what to say.
I had no idea your work had reached this level of significance. My mother's reaction was even more emotional. Oh, Cordelia, we're so proud of you. I'm sorry we didn't understand. I'm sorry we didn't see what you were building. Even Beatrice, who had always seemed slightly embarrassed by my career choice, called to express her amazement. Cordelia, I just saw the news. FBI director? I can't believe my little sister is going to be running the FBI. The Senate confirmation process was intensive, involving weeks of background investigations, multiple hearings, and extensive questioning about my qualifications and vision for the Bureau. My age was a constant topic of discussion, with some senators expressing concern about my ability to lead an organization with over 35,000 employees. During the hearings, I was able to publicly discuss some of my previous work for the first time. IBDAs had been declassified specifically for the confirmation process, allowing me to explain how behavioral analysis had transformed counterterrorism efforts. Senators, I said during one hearing, the threats facing our nation are evolving rapidly. Traditional law enforcement methods, while still valuable, must be supplemented by innovative analytical techniques that can identify dangers before they materialize into attacks. Senator Patricia Coleman of Texas asked the question many were thinking. Agent Blackwood, at 32 years old, do you truly believe you have the experience necessary to lead an organization with the FBI's responsibilities and complexity? Senator Coleman, I replied, experience is not solely measured by years in service. It's measured by impact achieved and lessons learned. I've spent my entire career focused on preventing the worst-case scenarios that keep Americans awake at night. That focus has driven innovations that have directly saved lives. I believe that's the kind of experience the FBI needs in its next director. The confirmation vote was closer than expected, 54 to 46, but sufficient for approval. At 32 years old, I became the youngest FBI director in the agency's history. The swearing-in ceremony took place on a cold January morning at FBI headquarters. My family sat in the front row, their expressions showing a mixture of pride and continued amazement at how far from their expectations my career had traveled. As I took the oath of office, I thought about Uncle Marcus and the detective shield he had given me so many years ago. I thought about the failures that had taught me more than any success, and about the analysts who had believed in unconventional approaches to impossible problems. Chief Justice Roberts administered the oath, his voice echoing through the ceremony room. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic? I do, I replied, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders along with the historical significance of the moment. The months following my confirmation brought both tremendous challenges and remarkable achievements. Leading the FBI required skills that extended far beyond analytical expertise, budget management, congressional testimony, international diplomacy, and crisis leadership. My first major test came 6 months into my tenure, when IBDAs identified a sophisticated terror network planning simultaneous attacks in 5 major cities. The threat was unlike anything we had previously encountered, involving both domestic and international operatives using advanced encryption and novel communication methods. The investigation required coordination between multiple federal agencies, state and local law enforcement, and international partners. As director, I had to balance operational security with the need to keep political leadership informed while ensuring that field agents had the resources necessary to prevent the attacks. The operation succeeded brilliantly. All 5 planned attacks were prevented, and the entire network was dismantled without a single civilian casualty. The success demonstrated both the effectiveness of behavioral analysis techniques and the FBI's ability to adapt to evolving threats. Media coverage of the operation's success was extensive, with particular focus on how my analytical innovations had made the prevention possible. For the first time, my family began to truly understand the scope of what I had been working toward throughout my career. My father called after reading a Washington Post article detailing the operation. Cordelia, I just finished reading about the attacks you prevented. 5 cities? Hundreds of potential casualties. Yes, Dad. It was a complex operation, but the systems we've developed made it manageable. I don't think I've ever truly understood what you do, he said quietly. I know I've been unsupportive at times. I'm sorry for that. What you've accomplished is extraordinary. This conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. My parents began to engage seriously with my work, asking questions about the challenges of leading a federal agency and expressing genuine interest in the innovations we were implementing. During my first year as director, I established the Blackwood Institute for Predictive Analysis within the FBI Academy. The institute trains analysts from federal, state, and local agencies in advanced behavioral modeling techniques, ensuring that innovative analytical methods spread throughout the law enforcement community. I also initiated the Young Analysts program, identifying promising college students interested in federal law enforcement careers and providing them with mentorship and specialized training. Having experienced the challenges of pursuing an unconventional path, I wanted to ensure that future analysts would have the support and encouragement I had often lacked. The program has been remarkably successful, attracting talented students who might otherwise have chosen private sector careers. Many participants have gone on to develop their own analytical innovations, continuing the cycle of improvement that keeps law enforcement ahead of emerging threats. 2 years into my tenure, I received an unexpected invitation to address the International Association of Police Chiefs about the future of law enforcement. My speech, titled Beyond Traditional Methods, The Role of Behavioral Science in Modern Policing, was attended by law enforcement leaders from 30 countries. The speech outlined how predictive analysis could transform not just counterterrorism efforts, but all aspects of criminal investigation. I shared case studies showing how behavioral modeling had solved cold cases, prevented corporate espionage, and identified human trafficking networks. The response was overwhelmingly positive, leading to requests for collaboration from agencies worldwide. Within a year, modified versions of our analytical techniques were being used by law enforcement agencies in 12 countries. Perhaps more importantly, the international recognition helped my family understand that my work had significance far beyond what they had previously imagined. My mother, who had spent years hoping I would transition to private practice, began introducing me to her friends as my daughter, the FBI director who revolutionized international law enforcement. Now, sitting at that family dinner table 3 years after my confirmation, I watched the familiar dynamics play out with new perspective. Beatrice discusses her latest Supreme Court argument, our parents offer supportive commentary, and I smile while sipping my wine. The conversation turns to me, as it inevitably does, but now the tone is different. Cordelia, we saw that interview you did with 60 Minutes, my mother says with genuine enthusiasm. The segment about preventing cyberterrorism was fascinating. Thank you, Mom. That story actually underestimated the scope of what we've accomplished. We can't discuss all the details publicly, but the impact has been significant. My father leans forward with interest. The reporter mentioned something about presidential briefings. Are you regularly advising the White House on security matters? Yes, Dad. Counterterrorism analysis has become integral to national security planning. We provide daily intelligence assessments that help shape both domestic and foreign policy decisions. Beatrice shakes her head in amazement. I still can't quite believe my little sister is running the FBI. Sometimes I have to remind myself that when I see you on the news, that's really my sister. The conversation continues in this supportive vein, but I notice the television in the background flickering with the familiar CNN logo. The volume is low, but news alerts have a way of commanding attention. Suddenly, the cheer-in at the bottom of the screen catches my eye. Breaking. FBI Director Cordelia Blackwood to be nominated for Attorney General. I freeze, wine glass halfway to my lips.
This is news to me.
My father notices my expression and follows my gaze to the television. The volume automatically increases as breaking news alerts trigger the smart TV system. We're interrupting our regular programming for this breaking news, the anchor announces. CNN has learned that President Morrison will nominate FBI Director Cordelia Blackwood for Attorney General, making her the youngest person ever to hold that position. The room falls silent. My family stares at the television, then at me, then back at the television. According to White House sources, the anchor continues, Director Blackwood's nomination comes in recognition of her revolutionary impact on federal law enforcement and her success in preventing dozens of terrorist attacks through innovative analytical techniques. My photo appears on screen, my official FBI director portrait in full formal attire. At 35 years old, Blackwood would break the age record for Attorney General by 8 years. Her rapid rise through federal law enforcement has been described by political historians as unprecedented in modern American government. The clatter of my mother's fork hitting her plate breaks the stunned silence. My father stands abruptly, his napkin falling to the floor unnoticed. Beatrice's mouth actually hangs open, her expression a mixture of shock and admiration. Cordelia, my mother's voice is barely a whisper. Is this true? I take a careful sip of wine, trying to process this unexpected news myself. If it is, this is the first I'm hearing about it. The president hasn't discussed this with me. Attorney General, my father repeats slowly, as if testing the words. The nation's top law enforcement officer. The youngest in American history, Beatrice adds, her voice filled with awe. The anchor continues. Blackwood's nomination would cap a remarkable career trajectory that began with her development of behavioral analysis techniques that revolutionized counterterrorism efforts. Her creation of the Integrated Behavioral Threat Assessment System is credited with preventing over 200 planned attacks during her tenure as FBI director. My phone begins vibrating insistently, undoubtedly White House officials trying to reach me about the leaked announcement. But for this moment, I remain focused on my family's reaction. My father starts laughing, not his usual controlled judicial chuckle, but the deep, joyful laughter I remember from childhood. Attorney General, he manages between laughs. My daughter, the Attorney General of the United States. My mother hasn't moved, still staring at the television where my face remains alongside the breaking news ticker. Tears stream down her cheeks. Mom, I say gently, are you all right? She turns to me, her expression cycling through emotions I can't quite identify. All these years, she says finally, all these years we worried you were limiting yourself. We thought you were choosing the harder path unnecessarily. When in reality, my father says, his laughter subsiding into something more reverent, you are exceeding every definition of success we could have imagined. Beatrice stands and raises her wine glass. To Attorney General Blackwood, she says, her voice sincere and proud. The most accomplished Blackwood in family history. As glasses rise around the table, my phone continues vibrating with calls from Washington. The leak has undoubtedly created chaos in White House communications offices, and I'll need to address the situation quickly. But for this moment, in the dining room where I had felt inadequate for so many years, I allow myself to savor this vindication I never sought but finally received. The hours following CNN's premature announcement became a whirlwind of phone calls, emergency meetings, and hastily arranged press conferences. The White House confirmed the nomination within 2 hours, with President Morrison making a surprise appearance to personally endorse my selection. Director Blackwood represents the future of American law enforcement, the president said during the impromptu press conference. Her innovations have kept us safer, and her leadership will ensure that the Department of Justice continues evolving to meet 21st century challenges. The formal nomination ceremony took place the following week, with my family in attendance looking considerably different from the skeptical relatives who had questioned my career choices for so many years. During my acceptance speech, I made sure to acknowledge the journey that had brought me to this moment. Success is rarely a straight line, I said, looking directly at my family. It requires the courage to pursue paths that others might not understand, the resilience to learn from failures, and the vision to see possibilities where others see only obstacles. My confirmation hearings were even more intensive than those for FBI director, but the questioning focused more on my policy vision than my qualifications. My age was mentioned, but the remarkable success of my tenure at the FBI had silenced most critics. 6 months later, I was sworn in as the 85th Attorney General of the United States, becoming the youngest person ever to hold the position and only the third woman in the office's history. My parents sat in the front row of the ceremony, their expressions showing pride, amazement, and what I recognized as a new understanding of what I had been working toward all these years. As Chief Justice Roberts administered the oath, I thought about Uncle Marcus, who had passed away the previous year, but had lived long enough to see me become FBI director. I thought about the failures that had taught me resilience, the mentors who had believed in unconventional approaches, and the family who had finally learned to trust my judgment even when they couldn't understand my methods. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States? I do, I replied, feeling the weight of history and the satisfaction of a journey that had led exactly where it was supposed to go. Today, as I lead the Department of Justice in addressing the complex challenges facing American law enforcement, I often reflect on the lessons learned from years of family disappointment and professional vindication. True success isn't measured by others' recognition, though recognition has its value. It's measured by impact achieved, lives protected, and systems improved. The path to extraordinary achievement rarely follows conventional routes. It requires the courage to pursue your instincts even when others question your judgment. My family's initial disappointment wasn't rooted in lack of love, but in fear of uncertainty and unfamiliarity. They couldn't support what they didn't understand, and they couldn't understand something so far outside their own experience. Most importantly, I've learned that the most meaningful achievements often require walking away from others' definitions of success and creating your own. Had I followed the well-marked path my family preferred, law school, private practice, eventual judicial appointment, I might have found conventional success, but I never would have developed innovations that saved thousands of lives. To anyone watching this who feels pressure to follow someone else's blueprint for success, trust your instincts. The road less traveled is more difficult, lonelier, and filled with more setbacks, but it's also where the most important discoveries happen, where the most significant contributions are made. My grandfather once told me that the truth is always there if you know how to look for it. The same applies to your own path. The truth of what you're meant to do is there. You just have to have the courage to pursue it, even when everyone around you is suggesting a different direction. The stars on my FBI Director badge, now joined by the seal of the Attorney General, aren't just symbols of rank. They're reminders that sometimes the most distant, seemingly impossible destinations are the ones most worth reaching. Throughout my journey, I've established mentorship programs for young people interested in federal law enforcement, particularly those whose families might not understand their career aspirations. I know firsthand how isolating it can feel to pursue a path that others view as unconventional or risky. The Blackwood Fellowship Program now provides scholarships and internships for students from families where law enforcement careers are discouraged or misunderstood. We pair these students with mentors who can guide them through the challenges of building careers in federal service while maintaining family relationships. Many of these young people face the same struggles I experienced. Families who equate success with traditional professions, parents who worry about safety and financial security, siblings who don't understand why anyone would choose public service over private sector opportunities. Through the program, I've learned that my experience wasn't unique. Countless talented individuals have been discouraged from pursuing federal law enforcement careers simply because their families couldn't envision success in those fields. One of our fellowship recipients, Marcus Chen, came from a family of doctors who viewed his interest in cybercrime investigation as a waste of his computer science talents. Today, he leads the FBI's cryptocurrency fraud task force and has recovered millions of dollars stolen through digital schemes. Another, Isabella Rodriguez, fought her family's expectations that she would join their successful restaurant business. She's now a supervisory special agent specializing in human trafficking cases and has helped rescue over 300 victims. These stories remind me that innovation often comes from people whose perspectives differ from the mainstream, who bring fresh approaches precisely because they haven't been shaped by conventional thinking. As Attorney General, I've continued pushing for technological innovation in law enforcement while ensuring that civil liberties protections keep pace with new capabilities. The balance between security and privacy requires constant vigilance, and I've made sure that the Department of Justice leads by example in responsible use of analytical tools. The integrated behavioral threat assessment system has been refined and improved over the years, but it now operates under strict oversight protocols that I personally helped develop. We've learned that powerful tools require equally powerful safeguards. My relationship with my family has evolved completely. My parents now serve on the advisory board for the Blackwood Institute, using their legal expertise to help ensure that our analytical techniques comply with constitutional requirements. My mother has become particularly passionate about privacy protection issues, bringing her corporate law background to bear on technology policy questions. Beatrice and I collaborate regularly on cases where cybercrime intersects with constitutional law. Her Supreme Court experience provides invaluable perspective on how new investigative techniques might be viewed by the judiciary. We've co-authored several law review articles on the intersection of technology and Fourth Amendment protections. Even more significantly, my family has become advocates for young people pursuing unconventional career paths. My parents regularly speak at college career fairs, encouraging students to consider federal service regardless of their family backgrounds or expectations. We almost made a serious mistake with our own daughter, my father often tells audiences. We let our own limited understanding nearly discourage her from a path that would ultimately benefit millions of Americans. Don't let fear of the unknown prevent you from supporting the young people in your life. 5 years into my tenure as Attorney General, I was invited to deliver the commencement address at Georgetown, my alma mater. Standing at the podium where I had once sat as an uncertain undergraduate, I looked out at hundreds of graduates about to begin their own journeys. Your families love you, I told them, but they may not always understand you. Their advice comes from their own experiences, their own definitions of success, their own fears about your future. Listen to their concerns, respect their wisdom, but don't let their limitations become your limitations. I paused, thinking about my own family sitting in the audience, now among my strongest supporters. The most important innovations, the most significant breakthroughs, the most meaningful contributions to society, they come from people who had the courage to pursue paths that others couldn't see or understand. Your job isn't to make your family comfortable with your choices. Your job is to make choices that honor your talents and serve purposes larger than yourself. The speech received a standing ovation, but what meant more to me was the conversation I had afterward with a young graduate named David Kim. He approached me during the reception, clutching his criminal justice diploma. "Attorney General Blackwood," he said nervously, "my parents want me to go to law school, but I want to join the FBI. They think I'm wasting my potential." I smiled, remembering my own conversation with Uncle Marcus so many years ago. "David, let me ask you something. When you imagine yourself 10 years from now, what are you doing that makes you feel most proud?" He answered immediately, "I'm preventing crimes before they happen. I'm using technology to protect people who can't protect themselves." "That sounds like excellent potential to me," I replied. "Have you considered applying for our Young Analyst program?" David Kim is now one of our most promising cybersecurity specialists, and his parents have become enthusiastic supporters of federal law enforcement careers. They attend every graduation ceremony for the Young Analyst program, helping other families understand the significance of public service careers. This pattern repeats itself regularly. Families who initially resist their children's interest in federal law enforcement often become our strongest advocates once they understand the impact and importance of the work. Last month, I received a letter from a mother in Ohio whose daughter had just graduated from the FBI Academy. "Thank you for showing us that success has many definitions," she wrote. "We almost lost the opportunity to support our daughter's dream because we couldn't see past our own expectations. Now we understand that she isn't just building a career, she's answering a calling." These letters remind me why the struggle was worthwhile. Every family that learns to support unconventional career paths, every young person who feels empowered to pursue their instincts, every innovation that emerges from diverse perspectives, they all contribute to a society that's safer, more just, and more capable of addressing complex challenges. As I write this, sitting in my office at the Department of Justice, I can see the portraits of previous attorneys general lining the walls. Most followed traditional paths through prestigious law firms and political positions. I represent something different, the possibility that expertise and leadership can emerge from unexpected directions. The Bronze Star Uncle Marcus gave me sits on my desk next to a photo of my swearing-in ceremony. In that photo, my family stands behind me, their faces showing pride, amazement, and the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from witnessing something they helped nurture, even when they didn't understand what they were nurturing. Looking back, I realized that my family's initial resistance wasn't the obstacle I thought it was preparation. Learning to persist despite discouragement, to maintain conviction despite criticism, to continue innovating despite skepticism. These skills proved essential when I faced much larger challenges in my professional life. The family dinner table, where I once felt like a disappointment, is now where we plan initiatives to help other families navigate similar challenges. My parents' legal expertise, Beatrice's constitutional knowledge, and my federal law enforcement experience combine to create programs that bridge the gap between family expectations and individual calling. To anyone watching this who recognizes themselves in my story, your family's love isn't diminished by their inability to understand your path. Their concerns are real, their fears are valid, but their limitations don't have to become yours. The courage to pursue unconventional paths isn't just about personal success. It's about ensuring that society benefits from the full range of human talent and perspective. Every breakthrough in science, technology, law enforcement, medicine, or any other field has come from someone who is willing to explore possibilities that others couldn't see. Your job isn't to make others comfortable with your ambitions. Your job is to honor your talents, serve purposes larger than yourself, and trust that the people who love you will eventually understand, even if they need time to catch up. The path from family disappointment to historic achievement isn't easy, but it's possible. It requires resilience, vision, and the unshakable conviction that your instincts about your own purpose are more reliable than others' assumptions about your limitations. If you found inspiration in my story, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need encouragement to follow their own unconventional path. And remember, history isn't made by those who follow the crowd. It's made by those brave enough to lead it in new directions. The seal of the Attorney General reminds me daily that sometimes the most distant, seemingly impossible dreams are the ones most worth pursuing. Trust your instincts, honor your calling, and remember that the greatest achievements often begin with the courage to disappoint people in order to serve purposes they don't yet understand. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your path is waiting for you to have the courage to walk it.